Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder videos, and a tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video view series where we take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. With this video, we'll be reviewing the level 1 to 2 adventure Curse on Beregost, a Candlekeep Mysteries Bookend, designed by Dan Kahn for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my content, consider using my affiliate links for your online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/RogueWatson. So what is a Candlekeep Mysteries Bookend? Well, it's a really clever, punny way of creating an expansion to an existing adventure, which means, so Candlekeep Mysteries is an anthology with, I believe, 17 different kind of small, tiny, bite-sized adventures, usually involving like a single dungeon crawl, for example. This takes one of those adventures, in this case the level 1 adventure, The Joy of Extra-Dimensional Spaces, and creates a longer intro at the beginning and a second part to it, I guess, at the end. So in other words, it bookends, creating a new content at the beginning and the end. So it's an expansion, but it's not just an expansion that's like a sequel that takes place after. It really does wrap around it. This is a really cool idea for an adventure that I don't think I've ever actually reviewed before, which is that, well, I get, so Dan has actually done this in a number of products that he's released, adventures, and I really like that content. In fact, I think his style is very similar to mine. We both enjoy taking existing 5e published adventures and campaigns and then kind of adding our own cool stuff on top of that. And I've really enjoyed seeing all the stuff he can do to stuff like Tomb of Annihilation and Rime of the Frost Maiden, Wild Beyond the Witchlight. A lot of really cool, interesting content, and I think it's very relevant to a lot of people on the DM's Guild because a lot of folks are probably running, you know, those published 5e campaign adventures and looking to inject them with additional content. In this case, it's a unique situation because people are, you know, obviously running the Candlekeep Mysteries adventures. In this case, looking at it, if you're just going to run this one adventure, then we can actually expand it into a larger adventure, and the entire adventure is inspired by just the tiniest adventure hook from The Joy of Extra Dimensional Spaces. So I'm actually going to flip back over to that one so you can get a refresher. I'll have to look at my Roll20 review screen in order to get that. So this is not a Roll20 review, but I'm just to remind you, because the adventure, The Curse of Beregost, as written, requires this adventure, which is the Joy of Extra-Dimensional Spaces, which again is the level 1 adventure from Candlekeep Mysteries. Now, I enjoyed Candlekeep Mysteries quite a bit when I reviewed it, and I even did a ranking video that ranked all 17 adventures, and I put this particular level 1 adventure at number 9, which is about halfway up my ranking. I was generally very positive about it. As a very brief recap, you are sent to find this wizard because, not even a wizard, a sage, because this one village has a curse and their crops are withering and their livestock are dying, and you need to go and get some information. You end up trying to follow in his footsteps, and he's at Candlekeep, but he's disappeared, and you realize that he's been teleported into this essentially a Mordenkainen magnificent mansion that has been permanently set up, but is of course full of dangers. And it really turns a kind of magical wizard's house into a level 1 dungeon crawl pretty effectively. So it's a really fun little dungeon crawl within this mansion. So what the Curse of Beregost does is take literally this like first paragraph of Joy of Extra-Dimensional Space and creates an entire narrative around that, which is a settlement has, you know, the crops have failed, livestock are dying, the rain has dwindled, local mage determined that a curse has been levied on the land, recommend the town seek aid from a sage named Matrius. And Matrius is the sage that you eventually find in here, although he has hardly a role at all. It's kind of a weird part of this adventure, and why it maybe didn't rank too much higher is that he ends up just kind of, essentially the whole story is you just getting trapped in here and having to find a way out, and then you end up leaving the place finally, and you realize that he's basically died from one of the traps that he kind of took with him. And so it's a really odd, like, oh, well, whoops, that whole thing was kind of a waste. So what this adventure does is it lets you, we're going to flip back now to, we can properly talk about the Curse of Beregost. So what this adventure does is first allows you to actually get to the town and get the quest, which is, yes, this town. So you get to the town first. The town is under duress. They're, you know, they've been cursed. The crops are dying. You know, all that is happening. But what you don't know is the reason for it is because a classic capitalist villain named Clarence, who I believe is a Dragonborn, has used eminent domain and taxes and harsh laws to build this very hilariously named Opulent Owlbear Inn, this extravagant inn that, of course, is just horribly not even gentrifying. It's just like it has no business being in this town of farmers. And of course the townsfolk are extremely angry about that. And one of them had even lost his farm, and he went to the woods to a hag and said, "Hey, I need you to take revenge on this guy." And of course, hag, not exactly a straight up bargainer, ends up putting a curse on the entire town, and everybody's kind of in ruin. So it's a really bad situation for everybody. And the players learn about this as they go to the town, and then they get ironically from Clarence himself, even, because he's like, "Hey, what's going on?" You get the mission that, "Hey, we know this person, Metrius, is in Candlekeep. We need you to go to him and, bring him back here, basically, and he'll figure out this curse for us. Why this one person? Whatever. This is part of the quest." So the weird thing is that's the intro. Then, so you get a better intro than the adventure provides in Candlekeep Mysteries. Then you just run the Candlekeep Mysteries adventure as is, like completely, which means it's not very well integrated, which is my big complaint about this one. It really feels like almost a modular design. You could almost swap in maybe even a couple different adventures, although with level restrictions, you'd have to scale things around. So you just end up running the Joy of Extra Dimensional Space kind of by itself as a self-contained module. You don't really get any other context for that. You're just there for a more expanded reason for why you're there to seek out Metrius, I guess. Now you've got the more context for that. Otherwise, you just run that whole little, which is a dungeon crawl. It's a pretty lengthy dungeon crawl. And at the end of it, when you reach the escape and you're collecting, but it's almost like a Myst. You're collecting like puzzle books, and they've got letters on them to try and spell out the word to escape. You come outside and you realize that Matrius has died, but he's got a book on him, and the book has all the answers, and the book has answers on curses. So you take the book, and then you return to the town, which begins part 3 here, or I guess the end of part 2 in this adventure, where you return to the quest givers, and the book very clearly spells out like, "Hey, there's a witch in this area. She's been known to do these kind of things. Here's her location." You basically get all the information from that book, and then the quest givers are like, "Oh yeah, well yeah, definitely go take care of that, please." So then the adventure becomes you just go into the woods and seek out this witch. Thankfully, this part of the adventure is also very entertaining. I think the actual hag layer is really well designed. It's got a lot of elements that I really enjoy. It checks all the boxes for puzzles, exploration, and combat, and role playing. Even though it's like 5 rooms, and it's you're level 1 for the extra dimensional space dungeon crawl, but then when you are done with it, you level up to 2, and then you're level 2 for this adventure here. So for level 2 dungeon, I think it's pretty appropriate. There's like quicksands full of crawling claws. There's a shadow mastiff that's loyal to the hag. There's a little puzzle door at the entrance you can see here, which even has a little graphic, which is nice. But then when you get to the actual hag, it mentions the fact that she's a hag, so she's evil, but she's not like murderously evil. She's more like just kind of wants to fuck with people evil. And she says, "You know what? I will lift the curse on the town if you get me a job at this new inn." Because she wants to be like, because right now she works at like the existing tavern or whatever, and she's like, I love just hearing all these people's sad stories and giving them bad advice, and that's how she gets her rocks off. And I just love the twist that the party could return to town saying, "Hey, we took care of the hag, and maybe we found that," and because hags can disguise themselves, we got this other person who would love a job working as a bartender at your new place. That's a really fun ending. Obviously, you can still fight the hag if you want to. She's still a CR3 green hag, and she's got her shadow mastiff with her. I think she can resummon it if the party fights it earlier. But I think that's a really memorable moment that she's actually willing to work with the party there at the end for a fun little role-playing negotiation scene. I really enjoy that. And it's bolstered by the fact that we get this nice full-color battle map, courtesy of Dr. Mapzo, of the actual hag layer, which is pretty cool. So it does a really interesting job of expanding the adventure. It's just not necessarily an expansion that I was expecting, which it really just takes, again, that one little intro paragraph from the Joy of Extra Dimensional Space and just mentions this town that's cursed, and like that's the reason the players are going. And the designer just ran away with that and said, "Okay, well, here's what's going on in the town, and let's let the players actually go to the town and see it firsthand and get the quest there, and then they go and do this adventure, but then they come back to the town." So it really adds a whole like follow-up area after that. Thankfully, those are all it's all good content. But my complaint is I just don't think it feels very modular in design, because I don't think it otherwise has anything to do with the joy of extra dimensional space, because there are elements of that adventure that I feel like could have been expanded, like Matrius's whole thing, like who is this person, and could he have a better some better connection with the story or something? Like, why do we care about this one sage? And then there's a whole thing in that story about the two wizards who I forgot the name of them, but their homunculus are still there, and there's constantly teases about these wizards that run the place or invented the place or whatever, the actual mansion, and yet you never see them in the context, and even says like further adventure, maybe the players could run into these people. So I was hoping we'd expand it in that way. So instead it really feels almost like a modular design where you could use this excuse to go to any dungeon, have any adventure to go find the sage, and then return and then still take care of this one adventure. So it's kind of an interesting modular bookend design, and I think the content itself is pretty solid, though, and otherwise a very, very short adventure, because the entire middle part of it is another adventure that you need in Candlekeep Mysteries. Now you could also ask me, well, Eric, can you run this without that adventure? Yeah, I think so. You just put the sage wherever you want and make content for that. So that's the modular nature of it. Maybe that's part of the advantage, is because it actually doesn't necessarily utilize that joy of extra dimensional space too aptly, that you could technically just put the sage wherever, or even put this cursed book wherever, and just make it be this, hey, we need this cursed book, and you just need a MacGuffin out there in another dungeon or adventure somewhere, and then you could insert any other content you wanted, and then you could still return to the town to complete this quest. So maybe that's actually the other side of the coin. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for Curse on Beregost. Pro, it greatly expands the adventure hook from the joy of extra-dimensional spaces. That one little paragraph that involves the cursed town, suddenly that's an entire adventure here. And really, I think it's just a cool idea to expand on that existing content. Dan Kahn did a really good job of that, specifically in the Wild Beyond the Witchlight adventure series, where he not only expanded the existing content, but then created new content that fits right into each of the different biomes, like realms, I guess, that are divided up in that Fey realm world. And this is kind of a similar design philosophy, where it wraps around an existing adventure already. And I really do think that's a cool way to approach adventure design. Pro is a well-designed hag layer dungeon with full color battle map with gridded and non-gridded versions, including player versions. I'm always a big fan of giving me those cool dungeon crawls that check all the different boxes. And in this case, it's a very small one, but I think it does everything it needs to do very well. And you're just coming off of, keep in mind, a giant, like, 3-story mansion dungeon crawl. So we don't really need anything too big here, but I thought it was pretty well done, and I love the fact that we get the battle map as well. And Pro, a memorable finale with the hag negotiations. I love a good hag. It's one of, if done right, I think it's one of the more memorable villains, because they're so prone to socializing and RP, and they're just pure evil, but they're not insanely so, right? Like they're willing to make all these deals and bargains, and evil with a sense of really intellectual cruelty. So I think if you're using a hag as a villain, I want to see you do that, and I think this does it very, very well in some cool, twisty ways while still being true to being a hag. So I really like the end of that very, very much. And then the con, you already know it, which is I think it lacks the more meaningful connections to the actual adventure it's trying to bookend, which is the joy of extra-dimensional spaces. I didn't see a lot of the cool, interesting connections and more story expansions that I feel like could have been done with that adventure, and instead it lends itself to a more modular design appeal. Still a very good quest, but it just feels like you really do like completely leave this quest behind when you step into the mansion and do that entire quest, which could take easily an entire session. And then after that, you like, oh, right, now we have the book. Now we can go back and solve that other quest. There just wasn't a whole lot of like interconnectivity, which I was hoping for when you're expanding the existing quest. Final verdict, Curse on Beregost expands the level 1 adventure from Candlekeep Mysteries beyond the infamous library, providing a lengthier and more story-satisfying quest. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel, and you can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Thomas, Stan, William, Brandon, Genocider, David, Eclectic, Roleplayer Roll, Christopher Bryan, William, David, Corey, Koa1337, Kyle, Matthew, Big Nut, Greenlee, John, and John. And gold patrons, RPG, Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcus, Dead Lizard, Lion, Sam, Lumpy Spuds, Drome, Nathan, Fast Like a Tortoise, Scott, Stephanie, Refison, Carolyn. Thank you all very much for your support.